All right, welcome into a new show here on the 5 Reasons NBA channel. This is not 5 on the floor, although you may hear it cross purpose because we do that with everything here at 5 Reasons Sports. This show is called 5 on It. We're going to talk about how we came up with that name. I'm Ethan Skolnick, and follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick at 5 Reasons Sports. I got Brian Fonseca. You can follow him at Brian Fonseca NY. We're going to be here for you weekly. And again, this is on the NBA on 5 Reasons podcast feed, as well as the 5 Reasons YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe to that feed because we'll start populating that with a lot more beginning in February as we lead up to the playoffs. And I'll let you explain it so that way I understand it. The concept of this show is, Brian?
Originally, we were going to have 5 NBA topics weekly to get into. And there will be weeks that there will be 5. But given how we just did a 5 on the floor episode where we put 5 on it for each topic we were talking about, where this team needs to make this trade and you put 5 on it if you agree the most or you're the most concerned or whatever, it's kind of like a different way of going 1 through 10 or 1 through 5. We just put 5 on it here.
Right. So we basically decided that in about 5 seconds right before the show, which is how we figure out most things. So we're going to run through some NBA topics. Again, some of these are going to apply to the Miami Heat because we know that that's what you're here for. Some of them will not because there is a world outside of that. And Brian, of course, is in New York where everything's falling apart. I think the way we do this is I'll throw out a topic. We'll go through it. You go through a topic. You throw out a topic. I'll go through it with you. And we're basically going to put up to 5 on it in terms of what we think is going to happen. That's pretty much, this is a prediction show. Everybody's always trying to get me to make predictions, percentages, because, I said Tyler Hero had a 75% chance of getting traded 3 years ago. Eventually I will be right. But I was not right at that time. And so everybody's always trying to get me to make more predictions just so I can look sillier so that they can aggregate it. By the way, the other reason this show is called 5 on It is we have a code 5 with Prize Picks. So we'll tell you about that here too. Use the code 5 FIVE. Put down your $5. You get $50 in free lineups. Prize Picks is the official fantasy sponsor of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. In addition to NBA, of course, you can play NHL, MMA, golf, tennis, everything, and yes, the Super Bowl. So they have those plays on there already. This is like the least interested I've been in a Super Bowl in a very long time. But Seattle, New England, if you want to play any of that, again, you can go to Prize Picks. Use the code FIVE. We will have shows on that leading up to it. And, of course, the NBA shows we do regularly, and we give you our plays on 5 Reasons Sports Twitter and all across the network. So check it out. It's prizepicks.com. Use the code 5. That's where you can put 5 on it. All right, let's get to the topic, not just of the day, of the week, of the season, Giannis. So this is where it's at as far as we know. But again, sometimes I always try to make this point, Brian. Sometimes when reporting comes out, it's not because it happened at that moment or in the past day.
Yep.
It's just when you happen to hear it from somebody, and then when you happen to report it. And there's all these games that go into that because obviously you want to get stuff out there before anybody else does. But you don't want to be wrong all the time, although some insiders are wrong all the time and nobody seems to care a scoop, or some of the others. I won't mention specific names, whatever. And there are some who are just not even, they don't have any reporting. They're just basically copying off other people. And that's one of the things I agree with Rich Paul about, by the way, that Twitter has become a total mess since everybody can get a check mark and you think somebody's legitimate when, again, they're just copying somebody else's work. Evan Settery. Anyway, I won't mention any other names. Okay. This is where we believe it is, right? Giannis has been complaining about a lot of things lately he didn't used to complain about. He's kind of gotten into it with the fans a little bit. He's kind of called out his teammates a little bit. These are things he hasn't done much in the past. He hasn't really seemed to be looking squarely in the face of Doc Rivers during timeouts. Then he diagnosed himself with a calf, the length of time he'd be out with a calf injury, which Milwaukee basically came out and said, yeah, he's a pretty good doctor. That timeline seems about right, 4 to 6 weeks. There's also all this noise that behind the scenes that maybe a trade has been asked for, even if it hasn't been explicit, it's been implied. And of course, we didn't even know at the time, Brian, and you cover the Knicks up there, that Giannis had allowed for this exclusive negotiating window during the summer for the Knicks. That didn't come out until later. So there may be things that come out later. And now there's this other report from Henry Abbott at True Hoop, who does not do a lot of original sourced reporting. He brought the True Hoop network onto ESPN. Originally, it was more of a stats thing, but he does have some sources. and he posted that that Giannis had considered firing his agent, who of course represents Aaron Saratsas, who of course represents Bam Adebayo as well, but not a whole bunch of other players, because he couldn't get him out of Milwaukee, which to me was the news of that. Okay, the fact that he might go to Rich Paul is kind of secondary. So there's all of this swirl right now, plus the fact that the Bucks are in the 11th spot. Without Giannis, they're not climbing out of the 11th spot, even though Chicago and Atlanta ahead of them are not very good. And so they're kind of stuck there, and it kind of benefits them to soft tank. So there's all of this going on. So I'm going to have you try to put 5 on it. What are the chances that I'll just start from the very beginning? What are the chances of everything you've heard that Giannis gets traded by the deadline?
Oh my goodness. And we're uniquely qualified to talk about this because if he does go somewhere, it'll be either to the team you cover or the team I cover, which makes this interesting.
By the way, are you sure of that? Do you see any other dark horse in there at this point? They do seem like the two front runners to me as well, but
yeah, which inevitably means he'll go somewhere else. To me, it depends on, all right, what does Houston want to do? What do the Spurs want to do? Toronto as well, because it feels like Toronto knows they have to do something with their roster. I don't know if they have enough, but they can piece together the contracts at a bare minimum and some sort of draft capital. So there are dark horses out there, absolutely. And with Houston, it's all about, okay, do you want to give up one of the kids? If we're still calling Alperen Sengun a kid at this point, but between him and Amen Thompson, I don't think you'll need both. I think you'll need one, and I feel like it'd be Alperen Sengun if it has to be one of the two. The other piece of this that we haven't mentioned is Rich Paul apparently wanting to or being interested in representing Giannis, according to that reporting as well. So I think there are a lot of elements to this, and I think it will be a 5-alarm fire if he switches representation any day, any minute now to this point. I'm gonna say. So originally, to me, this was like a 1 or a 2, probably coming into the season. I'm like, Giannis is an off-season thing. He's too big of a star. And typically these guys, like, they don't always get moved during the season. Kevin Durant going to Phoenix is like a rare. Well, actually, I think that was before the season.
Well, there was also Luka, but Nico Harrison is not involved in this, right? So.
Yeah. And Milwaukee will do. I'm failing to remember if the Kevin Durant trade was before the season or mid-season for some reason. But Kyrie Irving was definitely mid-season.
Yes.
Although I would.
For Isaiah Thomas, yes, that trade.
Yeah. No. The Dorian Finney-Smith, that one where he went. Right. But that one is not even like, that's not close to this. All due respect, I suppose. So to me, this is now it's not a 5, but I do think this is at least a 3.
Yeah.
Where I'm at with the Giannis situation is it's the first line we saw from Marlo Stanfield in The Wire when he's introduced in season 3. He says, "Do it or don't. I have somewhere to be." Like that. That's where I'm at with Giannis. do it or don't at this point with the trade requests. Like,
I thought you were going to go with the price of the brick has gone up. No. Actually, I think it's gone down. Honestly, as my earbud falls out.
But Ethan, that's the other thing of this. It's like everyone's like, "Yo, they're all gung ho about it because it's still Giannis. He's a top 5 player still when healthy." But isn't the calf strain, if it's a calf strain, a little concerning, or is this one not as concerning because you're like, I mean, is it really that bad?
Right, well,
diagnose yourself.
If you believe he's actually seriously injured or has this is legitimate, then it is a little concerning, only because it does seem like there's a pattern lately where player gets calf strain, player gets Achilles tear.
He had a calf strain earlier this year too.
Right, and it's happening with stars, right? It happened with Halliburton, it happened with Tatum. Halliburton had the calf strain that week, right? And then he played and
Kevin Durant famously years ago.
Kevin Durant. I mean, so this is the way it goes. So I do think it's somewhat concerning. Obviously, if you're going to be investing a supermax in a guy or something equivalent, as well as all the assets you got to give up to get him, then you have to be somewhat secure in his future. I'll say that I don't think it's going to affect most of the teams involved, and we're already seeing reporting that it's not. So either they don't buy into it, or they don't, or they just, again, are willing to take the risk. I mean, I think what you have to look at here, and by the way, I'm going to say it's a 3.5 to a 4 at this point. Okay, I've gone up a little bit. But I think what you have to look here is level of desperation from certain teams, right? And
Yes.
in a year like this, where we've talked about this, with the East being kind of wide open because the team at the top, nobody really trusts it only because they haven't been there before. I mean, they lost in one series last year, and all the other teams are flawed. And even OKC has shown signs of vulnerability. And Denver, Jokic is out. So there are going to be teams that talk themselves into this. And so I do think that there's going to be more willingness to take some risk. Now, as far as Milwaukee's end of this goes, Ty Windish wrote a column for us for On SI, and he appeared on Five on the Floor, where he said this basically saves the Bucks for themselves, right? Like now the Bucks won't go get Jeremy Grant, Michael Porter Jr. move to kind of placate Giannis and keep him. The way they would try to placate Giannis and keep him is to be bad the rest of the year and get themselves a top 5 pick or something close to that, and then try to rebuild from there starting next year. Kind of say, look, it's a reset year, like it is for the Pacers, like it was supposed to be for the Celtics, and we'll get right back at it. Do I think that's going to work with Giannis at this point? No, I think there's too much smoke at this point. And I also think that his desire to get to another place, to sign the Supermax, to get started in the last – look, even if he's out for 6 weeks, he's back by what? Mid-March at the latest. Yeah. I mean, he still has a month ramp up to the playoffs. Nobody's going to want to play any team that he's on. And he'll be refreshed in other ways physically by then. So I think there's definitely a movement towards that direction. Every report we've heard over the past few days moves it that way. So I'm going to say 3.5 to 4. I am scared that there is another team that's going to get involved beyond the team that two teams we're talking about, because there always does seem to be the blindside team lately. Toronto was the blindside team with Kawhi. Nobody was really expecting that. Of course, Milwaukee was with Dame. But I think he's going to get traded by the deadline. I do. I'm the 3.5 to 4 on our 5 on it chart. I just think it's run its course there. I don't know how that thing can be refreshed quickly. It's a terrible roster. They're awful at drafting. So even if they have a top 10 pick, they're not going to draft a good player anyway. John Horst hasn't drafted a good player since that organization has not drafted a good player since Giannis. By the way, he didn't draft Giannis, right? It was John Hammond.
Yeah. And they do have a development problem. Also, like, really, they should have just traded him after this past season, because I thought this was over once you waive and stretch Damian Lillard.
Well,
because
right.
the other piece of this is, like, you have $21 million in dead money for like the next 4 seasons after this year.
They can't do anything.
Like, you signed Miles Turner for nothing.
Right. I still don't know why they did that. And they were about to make another move like that, I believe. And so again, this injury saved them from themselves. But I'm going to say 3.5 to 4. I think he gets moved. I think it is probably one of the two teams that you and I cover primarily. I just don't understand what the goal would be with the Knicks trade, only because I just don't see the young pieces that you're going to get unless they just don't like Miami's young pieces, which is possible.
I think if it's the Knicks, it has to be a 3-team deal at least.
Yes,
that's the thing.
Towns has to be going somewhere else, right? Like that's what has to happen. There's no point in Milwaukee. No,
it makes no sense with the Bucks. Like, if you're going to construct, and I'm trying to do this actively because I have another show later where we're actually going to talk about this,
right? And
it's like, okay, how do you do the Giannis trade? Because the Knicks are the team that I think needs him the most, because their window is now. All the core is in their prime, like Brunson, Hart, McHale. OG.
No, they're more desperate than Miami. I would agree with that. 100%. I think I would actually argue the teams in the East, if you were to say desperation, I would say it's New York 1. I think it's Cleveland. Who are you saying? Who are you saying?
Cleveland 2, Orlando 3.
No, those are my 3. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I was debating Cleveland or Orlando too. Orlando has a little more youth, but I think Orlando's going to do the one thing. And our Tony Mejia wrote about this for the On SI Orlando site. I think Orlando's going to do the one thing you do before you change the roster. I think they're going to flip the coach, I think it's going to be Michael Malone. And you know what? Let's that's a good segue to what we're going to do in part 2 here today. So all right, so you're going 3. I'm going 3.5 to 4. We're going to tell you one more time about Prize Picks. Use the code 5 FIVE. Put down your $5. Get $50 to play right away. We're also going to be telling you about something called Pine Sports. which actually is going to help you make your plays on Prize Picks. It's an AI generator. There's going to be a code for that as well, code 5 FIVE, and they give you basically the best plays all across the spectrum, but they have a Prize Picks specific tab. So we're going to align all of this stuff for you so you can enjoy the NBA season and make some money as we go forward. Check it out. It's prizepicks.com. Use the code FIVE. All right, you want to get to that next before we get to Memphis? Orlando,
Yes.
what are the chances in your view that Jamahl Mosley is fired by the All-Star break, or by the time we come back from the All-Star break?
Ooh, by the All-Star break. Because after the season, I think I put 5 on it. All-Star break, I'm gonna say 3 also. It's a hard thing to do mid-season, and I don't know what is the interim coach gonna solve. Now, it's been okay so far in Denver, right? They ended up going with Adelman, and Adelman's been fine. Malone kind of wore out his time there, even after shortly after winning a title. They just needed to change there. Memphis, the results are mixed.
Yeah, mixed. You're going with mixed.
Mixed at best.
I mean, he's alienated his star. Doesn't seem to have
well, his star's not a star anymore.
Correct. All right, but he's also limited in the minutes. Now, I will say he's gotten a lot out of that bench, but they've gotten and the last 2 drafts, they've gotten a lot out of the last 2 drafts. They're good at drafting. The rest of the stuff, keeping guys healthy, they're not particularly good at. But they haven't beaten anybody good this year, and they're going to sink to like the 13 spot. It looks like so.
3 for Orlando for me. I also think like they have the contracts to pull off a Giannis deal. Like if they really wanted to get super bold, now you're not going to move Paolo now because he's a poison pill contract that that's not happening until the summer at earliest, if you're even going to do that, which I doubt. I think to your point, they fire the coach first and then see. But this is why they're also in terms of the most desperate teams in the East, why it feels like they're 3, because they kind of put the timeline on themselves where they're like, hey, we're going to accelerate this now, go all in on this Desmond Bane deal. Bane's been fine.
But and yet they have the same record that they had last year.
With similar injuries, ironically, right? But the crisis coming for them contractually is Franz Wagner is going to be at 41 million next year, Desmond Bane at 39 next year, Jalen Suggs at 32.5 next year, and Paolo at 41.5 next year. That's between 150, 160 million between 4 guys, and that's not even including like what Wendell Carter Jr. is going to make if he's still on the roster at 18. Jonathan Isaac at 14.5, who I'm sure they would love to dump right now. I don't even know what you're getting back at this point. And then you have like more with like a Goga Batadze expiring. Are you going to extend Anthony Black? And if so, he's going to be making more, 10 million next year. But after that, he'll take a jump, whether it's 20, 25, 30. I don't know what that's going to be. You can't afford to pay everybody. So this was like the Desmond Bane trade was like, okay, let's see what this roster can do. And then I think it's very clear that another move, maybe a more dramatic move is coming. But first, it's going to be Mosley. And then anything else that they're going to do, I think will get pushed to after the playoffs. They'll see how they do in the playoffs. And if it's the first round exit, then, well, there might be a bit more of a shakeup than they wanted.
Yeah, I'm with you in that the Bane move accelerated everything. So you can't really use the excuses of injuries or anything else along those lines, because the whole point of the Bane move, other than giving you more shooting, which, by the way, they still don't have enough shooting. They were the worst outside shooting team in the league, even with him. And it has not been his fault, but they just haven't gotten it from other guys. But the other part of that was his presence was supposed to make up for injuries that others might have and their absences. And it's just not enough. And you still sort of are sitting here with this problem. And I know the Heat have had this problem with Powell and Hero, but this is 2-3 years now where with Banchero and Wagner, you don't really know if it works. Like there are some metrics that show it does, and there are some metrics that show they're better with one or the other. What is shown consistently is they don't play well when Suggs doesn't play.
Yes.
And he can't stay healthy. So I don't know, again, it's a little opposite than the Heat situation with Hero, because we're not quite clear that the Heat play better when Hero plays. But the Magic do play better when Suggs plays, but it's still the uncertainty of a guy in and out of the lineup is problematic for them. This was their year to pop. Like, see, I looked at them and Detroit and Houston, okay? Those 3 teams went into soft tank to real tank mode after OKC did. Those three franchises all kind of had, excuse me, took different paths up, right? Detroit was the worst for a while. Okay. Orlando seemed to come out of it first, but Detroit has zoomed past Orlando now. And Detroit, by the way, made a coaching change. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that may be where this is leading. And they actually got a coach who Cleveland thought was not good enough to elevate them. And Cleveland went and got a different coach. I think it's a 3 that Mosley's fired by the also coming out of the All-Star break. And I do think at the end of the season, if they're a first round out, and I don't even know if they're getting there. Right now, they're in the play-in. And we're looking at that same Miami-Orlando play-in situation. Again, Orlando has, and it's interesting we're talking about them this week, Orlando's beaten them 3 times. They're going to have the tiebreaker on Miami one way or the other. But they were not supposed to be in a position, as much as we complain about Miami, and I've complained about them enough, and they're 3 games over 500. And whether they picked a direction or not, Orlando kind of picked a direction, and yet they're still behind Miami, barely, right?
Yeah.
Even while beating them 3 times, when they were supposed to be ahead, everybody projected Orlando to win that division. And right now they're behind Miami, and that's just not acceptable. In fact, that division is so bad that the best team in it is 7th in the conference. All right, so I'm going to say 3, but then 5 by the end of the season. All right, let's get to one more here. The Memphis situation, which is now complicated by this report about Robert Pera. I recommend everybody check out Pablo Finds Out because he's on a historic run right now. I'm glad he's finally gotten away from Bill Belichick's girlfriend to focus on stuff that's a little bit more important. But I don't want to get into that too much because I really need to read up on it. Let's just get to the Ja situation. Do you think Ja, before we get to whether or not he's gone or not by the deadline, do you think Ja is more sincere in wanting to stay in his current place than Giannis is in wanting to stay in his current place?
Yeah, easily.
Yeah.
Easily. I think to me it just seems like Giannis doesn't want to be the bad guy, or as you put it, he wants plausible deniability. I think he's trying to be Dame 2.0, Damian Lillard, who clearly wanted to go somewhere. At the very least, actually, Damian Lillard was probably more aggressive because the trade request was out there, putting it out through Chris Haynes, his guy. And then, all the subtle, wanting Miami things, and Chris Haynes going on pods. He was doing a show with Mark Stein at the time saying Miami, like this is where he wants to go, Miami. Damian Lillard, being at whatever party that was with Miami playing in the background, Will Smith's song. Like he was more upfront about what he wanted, where he wanted to go, but he wasn't doing it in an aggressive manner like the way Jimmy Butler would or the way James Harden would. Those are the guys that get what they want ultimately. Damian Lillard was nicer about it, even though he was kind of aggressive. He was nicer about it. And behind the scenes, like they ultimately didn't get the cooperation. He ends up going to Milwaukee instead of Miami, and it went how it went. Giannis hasn't even gone that far. Like the most we've gotten is Brian Windhorst saying, "Hey, he's already requested the trade. He deleted the stuff off Instagram. He, wanted to go to the Knicks, whatever." But with Ja Morant, you're not really getting any of that. You're getting people out of Memphis saying that he wants to stay there. Now, to be fair, I think people are overprotective of Ja Morant in Memphis. So, and that's not a shot at our guy Eternal, but if you look at the reporting going around there, like if you hear even what Chris Verno says, on the Ringer shows or whatever.
And we've had Joe Mullinex on, and I think he's spoken to. He believes that Ja's going to turn things around from a shooting perspective when he gets somewhere else, simply if he can play 5 consecutive games. He just thinks that the lack of rhythm. But again, that's part of what comes with Ja.
When you say turn it around from a shooting perspective, do you mean he's going to go back to shooting 31% like he has for his career from 3?
Well, I mean, that would be an improvement over the 18 that he was shooting for the majority of the season, right? Like, I think, look, I don't think there's any question that Ja can still be an elite playmaker. Whether he can be an elite play finisher like he was, and even a slightly below average shooter to complement it, that I don't know. That's the question. Like, and there's this whole mystery on whether or not his struggles are because he's unhappy, because it's lack of rhythm, or because he's seriously declined. And so sometimes he'll pop with a game and they're like, oh, wait a second, he's just been unhappy. And I do think that's been the case with certain guys. I think I'll give my number here. I think it's a 4 that he's going to get moved. I think the reason I think it's a 4
by when?
By the deadline.
Really?
Yeah.
4? Oh shit.
And I think so, because I think if you look at Memphis' situation right now, first thing, they're not going to make the playoffs. Okay. It looked for a little while like they were creeping up to 8 or 7. The Zach Edey injury to me changed that, because they don't play very well without him. Like they elevated to a top defense in the
That
minute.
front office loves him.
I know, and they're going to build around him, but he and Ja have played 5 minutes together the whole season. So I don't think there's any point in waiting to see how this whole thing develops. I think you've got Edey, you've got Coward, you've got Cam Spencer, you've got Wells. You figure out what to do with Jaren. I would trade Jaren also. I would trade Jaren. I would trade Ja. I would lean into the lottery pick. I would lean into these young players. They draft well. So if you're this is the thing with Miami and with Memphis, is we always talk about, well, you're going to give up picks. I think if you're an organization that drafts well, you're less inclined to give up those picks. And that's the one thing that Memphis has done effectively, has been draft. So if I were them, I would move Ja and just clear it off. I don't see a version of them going forward where Ja is leading this young group. I don't. I don't think that's where you're at. I think you're hoping he's going to get to a certain level. I'm not saying there's a superstar in this mix, although I think Coward has potential to be sort of Kawhi light, maybe if they give him more responsibility. But I think they're going to trade him, and I don't think they're going to get a lot for him. I think that's where we're headed.
I'm a little surprised at that, because I would have said 2 before you say all that, but this may change my answer. Are you saying 4 because you think the team in Miami is going to get him, and that's why this is actually a 4?
I don't necessarily think it's going to be them. But again, I think it depends on the intel they have related to Giannis. And I don't know the intel they have related to Giannis. I just know that I've been told, when I've asked about anything, for those who still talk to me, because there are some who shut it down lately, which tells me something's up, something's working, is they are not going to give up an asset for anything that gives them a worse chance of getting Giannis. That's where they're at.
Giannis is the prize for them.
And I don't blame them at all. But if they can get him for the Rozier contract and Fontecchio and maybe one young asset, then I think possibly they would do that. All right, so that's where
Ja's a take it or leave it thing for them, from my understanding. Like Ja is like they'll take Ja on their price.
Yes.
And they'll take Ja if it's like just matching salary and maybe like Yakachonis or something like that. Maybe.
Right.
And that's really it. But they want to be all in for Giannis. So I'll formally say it's a 3. No, I've been giving out 3s the whole episode. I'll say it's a 2 because I don't think it happens. I feel like maybe they try to work it out. I just don't. Look, another one-way high usage guard who is hyper athletic, who can't shoot and could never shoot. I just don't think his game is going to age that well, and I think they know that, which is why even if they do trade him, they're not going to get much back, even though they probably want a lot back because it's Ja Morant. But he hasn't been that guy for a while.
They drew the line on Dame. In part because of the guy they were dealing with, but also
Miami
age, defense, and salary. They drew the line at a certain point. They have a value, they have a price. Even with Durant, they had a value, they had a price. Giannis, I don't think that there's a value and there's a price. I think it's just go get it and figure the rest out.
Anyone but Bam, basically, is my guess.
Pretty much. I wonder how that changes if he changes age. I do want to add one thing before we close here. People should not be afraid from the Miami perspective of the clutch thing if Rich Paul takes him over. That relationship, I've mentioned that before, has healed a lot. The Heat have no problem dealing with clutch. I can tell you that. And a lot of their problems they've had with agents and negotiations have been with the agents they've liked the most. They've had issues with Bartlestein, with the late Henry Thomas. Those were agents they dealt with the most. This idea that they won't deal with clutch because it's much worse than everything else, no. That's just not the case. And remember, they signed Alec Burks a couple years ago. He's a clutch guy. I know people always talk about Maxey as being a clutch issue. I don't think it was a clutch issue. I think it was they thought they had enough guards issue. And they made a bad decision to go get somebody to play with Bam who couldn't play with Bam, and that's Precious. And you dealt with them in New York. Anyway, we're at 30 minutes. We didn't put 5 on anything, but we got pretty close to it. We'll be doing more episodes. Brian and I. Check them out on the NBA and 5 Reasons feed. We really want to build that thing, get some more content, and use a lot of our on SI people there as well. So Brian and I will be back with you later in the week, and maybe we'll do a couple episodes leading up to the trade deadline next week. So thanks for joining us, everybody. Use the code 5, FIVE, at prizepicks.com.